The term biodiversity refers to the variety of life on Earth at all its levels, from genes to ecosystems, and can encompass the evolutionary, ecological, and cultural processes that sustain life. Biodiversity includes not only species we consider rare, threatened, or endangered, but also every little thing, from humans to organisms we know little about, such as microbes, fungi, and invertebrates. Biodiversity is important to most aspects of our lives. We value biodiversity for many reasons, some utilitarian and some intrinsic. The economic or utilitarian values of biodiversity rely upon the dependence of man on biodiversity. Products that nature can provide, like wood, food, fibers to make paper, resins, chemical organic products, genes, as well as knowledge for biotechnology, including medicine and cosmetic subproducts. On the other hand, the intrinsic value of biodiversity refers to its inherent worth, which is independent of its value to anyone or anything else. Thus, biodiversity has an intrinsic value because it is part of the natural world, and the conservation of species, genetic resources, and ecosystems is important for the maintenance of natural ecological processes. The bottom line is, this means we value biodiversity both for what it provides to humans and for the value it has in its own right. Understanding biodiversity within the concept of ecosystem needs a thorough study on the relationship of the living and non-living things. Biodiversity is essential to the healthy functioning of ecosystems. A driver is any natural or human-induced factor that directly or indirectly causes a change in an ecosystem. A direct driver clearly influences ecosystem processes, while an indirect driver operates by altering one or more direct drivers. From this figure, we can see that indirect drivers of change are demographic, economic, sociopolitical, scientific, technological, cultural, and religious. Mostly, this is because of our needs and activities. Important direct drivers include climate change, plant nutrient use, land conversion, leading to habitat change, and invasive species and diseases. Population demography, urbanization, economic development, technology and innovation, and climate change impose multiple negative impacts on biodiversity, leading to loss of genetic diversity. Population declines to have pushed some species towards a heightened risk of extinction, and the reshaping of natural communities with ramifications for the stability and functioning of ecosystems. According to Lidley and Newbold, while most drivers are projected to increase, climate change is likely to become the dominant driver of biodiversity change in the next few decades. Ultimately, reducing pressures on biodiversity will require addressing these drivers of change. Over the last century, humans have come to dominate the planet, causing rapid ecosystem change and massive loss of biodiversity across the planet. This has led some people to refer to the time we now live in as the Anthropocene. While the Earth has always experienced changes and extinctions, today they are occurring at an unprecedented rate. Major direct threats to biodiversity include habitat loss and fragmentation, unsustainable resource use, invasive species, pollution, and global climate change. In May 2019, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IPBES, released its global assessment, identifying the major threats to biodiversity worldwide. It explicitly noted that human population growth is an indirect driver of biodiversity loss, and stated the sixth mass extinction, habitat destruction, overexploitation, climate change, pollution, agricultural intensification, and invasive species. Healthy ecosystems, interdependent webs of organisms, and their physical environment are vital to all life on Earth. Our ecosystems provide us with clean air, fresh water, food, resources, and medicine. Biodiversity is a major factor in nature's resilience. In a biodiverse ecosystem, if the environment changes and some organisms can no longer thrive, others can take their place and fulfill essential functions. It is often the most overlooked species that are the most important to healthy ecosystems. Insects, for example, play an essential role in pollinating flowering plants, and a third of the food we eat depends on animal pollinators. Now, going back to the threats of biodiversity, since life appeared on Earth, there have been several mass extinctions in which many species were wiped out because of catastrophic climate change, volcanic activity, and the impact of an asteroid or other reasons we have not yet discovered. The plants and animals which currently live on Earth have continued to evolve over the 65 million years since the last mass extinction. But many scientists considered the huge reduction in biodiversity since the emergence of humans is now on the scale of another mass extinction. This is known as the Anthropocene extinction or the sixth mass extinction. WWF's latest Living Planet report estimates that we have lost 68% of all vertebrate wildlife population since 1970. That's more than half of all birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and fish gone in just 50 years. During that time, our population has more than doubled, increasing from 3.7 billion to over 7.8 billion today. Invertebrates, while understudied, aren't faring any better. A German study found that flying insect populations have crashed by three-quarters since 1989, reflecting similar trends around the world. Biodiversity loss is attributable to several causes, but by far the biggest culprits are habitat destruction and overexploitation of species, driven by our exploding numbers and unsustainable consumption. Ever more people need ever more space. Damaging human activity continues to encroach on natural environments, thereby destroying the habitats of countless species. As our number rise, cities, infrastructure, and cropland are growing and merging into each other, fragmenting the remaining habitat and leaving isolated islands of natural populations of plants and animals too small to survive. According to IPBES, only 1/4 of land areas and 1/3 of oceans remain relatively undamaged by human activity. Ever more people need ever more things. Humankind's relentless consumption of resources such as timber, oil, and minerals is continuing to destroy natural habitats around the globe. We are also putting enormous pressure on populations of wild species, both by bushmeat hunting in the developing world and by large-scale industrial fishing in our seas. Wildlife poaching and trafficking still present a huge threat to many species, including rhinos, tigers, and pangolins. Ever more people produce even more climate emissions. Our planet is on the verge of a climate crisis due to our endless production of greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide and methane. We are headed for a 3 to 4 degrees Celsius warmer world by the end of the century if nations' current climate ambitions are delivered on. We are already seeing species decline due to the global temperature increase. Every half a degree of warming has a huge knock-on effect on ecosystems, with mobile species running out of areas to migrate to and temperature-sensitive organisms like corals undergoing massive die-offs. When keystone species like reef-building corals disappear, the rich and complex ecosystems they support collapse as well. Ever more people produce ever more waste and pollution. As populations increase, the disposal of waste from households, agriculture, and industry becomes an increasingly serious issue. Our oceans are becoming choked with plastic waste, which is killing millions of animals, from sea turtles to whales. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation estimates that by 2050, there will be more plastic than fish in the sea, as well as affecting the lives of humans. Noise, light, and chemical pollution all damage the health of wild species. Ever more people need ever more food. Agriculture deserves a special mention here as it is a primary driver of habitat destruction, climate change, and pollution. Agriculture takes up 50% of all habitable land on Earth. 80% of extinction threats to mammal and bird species are due to agriculture. And our modern food systems are also the biggest contributor to climate change, responsible for around a third of all greenhouse gas emissions, with more than half of these coming from animal agriculture. In order to meet up the unsustainable consumption patterns of global north and feed our huge population, humanity has developed agricultural systems which rely on monocultures, artificial fertilizers, and pesticides. Monocultures are increasingly susceptible to disease, so require widespread pesticide use, which destroys insect populations. Intensive farming leads to soil depletion, and runoff from farms pollutes water bodies and causes harmful algal blooms and the collapse of fish stocks. Ever more people means ever more travel. Human travel across the world has a very large emissions footprint, but it has also allowed the spread of invasive species, both accidental and intentional. As a consequence of the introduction of non-native species to some areas, we have put many vulnerable ecosystems at risk, threatening native species and diminishing biodiversity. Even with the improvement of technology and science at present, we still have a lot to learn about biodiversity. More so about the consequences of biodiversity loss. The particular species making up an ecosystem determine its productivity, affect nutrient cycles and soil contents, and influence environmental conditions such as water cycles, weather patterns, climate, and other non-biotic aspects. People depend on biodiversity in their daily lives in ways that are not always apparent or appreciated. Human health ultimately depends upon ecosystem products and services, which are requisite for good human health and productive livelihoods. Biodiversity loss can have significant direct human health impacts if ecosystem services are no longer adequate to meet social needs. Indirectly, changes in ecosystem services affect livelihoods, income, local migration, and on occasion may even cause or exacerbate political conflict. Additionally, biological diversity of microorganisms, flora and fauna provides extensive benefits for biological health and pharmacological sciences. Significant medical and pharmacological discoveries are made through greater understanding of the Earth's biodiversity, and loss in biodiversity may limit discovery of potential treatments for many diseases and health problems. There is also a growing concern about the health consequences of biodiversity loss. Biodiversity changes affect ecosystem functioning, and significant disruptions of ecosystems can result in life-sustaining ecosystem goods and services. Biodiversity loss also means that we are losing, before discovery, many of nature's chemicals and genes of the kind that we have already provided humankind with enormous health benefits. Biodiversity plays a crucial role in human nutrition through its influence on world food production, as it ensures the sustainable productivity of soils and provides the genetic resources for all crops, livestock, and marine species harvested for food. Access to a sufficiency of a nutritious variety of food is fundamental determinant of health. Traditional medicine continue to play an essential role in health care, especially in primary health care. Traditional medicines are estimated to be used by 60% of the world's population, and in some countries are extensively incorporated into the public health system. Medicinal plant use is the most common medication tool in traditional medicine and complementary medicine worldwide. Medicinal plants are supplied through the collection of wild populations and cultivation. Many communities rely on natural products collected from ecosystems for medicinal and cultural purposes, in addition to food. Although synthetic medicines are available for many purposes, the global need and demand for natural products persists for use as medicinal products and biomedical research that relies on plants, animals, and microbes to understand human physiology and to understand the threat of human diseases. Human activities are disturbing both the structure and functions of ecosystems and altering native biodiversity. Such disturbances reduce the abundance of some organisms, cause population growth in others, and modify the interactions among organisms, and alter the interactions between organisms and their physical and chemical environments. Patterns of infectious diseases are sensitive to these disturbances. Major processes affecting infectious disease reservoirs and transmission include deforestation, land use change, water management, irrigation, uncontrolled urbanization or urban sprawl, resistance to pesticide chemicals used to control certain disease vectors, climate variability and change, migration and international travel and trade, and the accidental or intentional human introductions of pathogens. And of course, I think you know that it's also the cause for the COVID 19 virus. Biodiversity provides numerous ecosystem services that are crucial to human well being at present and in the future. Climate is an integral part of ecosystem functioning, and human health is impacted directly and indirectly by results of climatic conditions upon terrestrial and marine ecosystems. Marine biodiversity is affected by ocean acidification, related to levels of carbon in the atmosphere. Terrestrial biodiversity is influenced by climate variability, such as extreme weather events, that directly influence ecosystem health and the productivity and availability of ecosystem goods and services for human use. Longer term changes in climate affect the variability and health of ecosystems, influencing shifts in the distribution of plants, pathogens, animals, and even human settlements. Here are the key facts that we could take away from our discussion. Biodiversity provides many goods and services essential to life on Earth. The management of natural resources can determine the baseline health status of community. Environmental stewardship can contribute to secure livelihoods and improve the resilience of communities. And the loss of these resources can create the conditions responsible for morbidity and mortality. Second, biodiversity supports human and societal needs, including food and nutrition, security, energy, development of medicines and pharmaceuticals, and fresh water, which together underpin good health. It also supports economic opportunities and leisure activities that contribute to overall well-being. Third, land use change, pollution, poor water quality, chemical and waste contamination, climate change, and other causes of ecosystem degradation all contribute to biodiversity loss and can pose considerable threats to human health. Fourth, human health and well-being are influenced by the health of local plant and animals communities and the integrity of the local ecosystems that they form. Last but not the least, infectious diseases cause over 1 billion human infections per year, with millions of deaths each year globally. Approximately two-thirds of known human infectious diseases are shared with animals, and the majority of recently emerging diseases are associated with wildlife. The good news is that it is within our power to change our actions to help ensure the survival of species and health in